Hello again. So today I want to talk to you about the term user experience design because it's rapidly become one of the most tortured, twisted titles in the whole of the world of the web. And frankly, enough is enough. It leaves clients confused, UI designers undervalued, and makes moving into UX design unnecessarily complicated. This complete lack of clarity over the role of a UI and a UX designer has become so damaging that I'm actually toying with the idea of running an online workshop that clearly defines the difference between the two relationships, explains what UX design is in more depth, and enables people to transition from being a UI designer into being a UX designer. Is that something you might be interested in? Is it worth doing? Would you pay £250 for 6 hours of training helping you make that transition? If so, then can you let me know by just giving me your name and email by going to subscribe.boagworld.com/UI to UX, and I'll let you know if and when I decide to run the workshop. My problem with the way UX design is presented is threefold, basically. First of all, UX and UI design are often referred to as if they're the same thing, and they're absolutely not. To make matters worse, UX design is nothing like the way that it's normally described. And finally, UX design is often treated as superior in some way to UI design, which is, again, not true. So let me unpack these myths or problems or whatever you want to call them in a little bit more detail. If I see one more job advertisement for a UI/UX designer, I swear somebody's going to get punched. I trained as a UI designer and did that role for probably over half of my 27-year career. And I'm now a UX designer, UX consultant. Yet despite all these years of experience in both roles, there is no way that I could fulfill both roles effectively. You can't be a great UI designer and a great UX designer. And that's because they're two different jobs and you cannot have all of the skills that both jobs require. The problem is that many people, especially employers, don't understand really what UX design is, which brings me on to that second problem. So many people think the UX design is basically a set of methodologies that sit on top of the work of a UI designer. The UX design means that you've done some upfront user research, you've run some workshops with lots of post-it notes and tested a few wireframes before you go on to produce the final design. Now, yes, UX designers do these things. However, suggesting that doing them therefore makes you a UX designer is a bit like saying, I must be a surgeon because I wash my hands and wear a mask. Yes, surgeons do those things, but so do a lot of people. In fact, a good UI designer will produce wireframes and they will care about the user research and they will test their design. These aren't tools that are exclusive to UX designers. While a UI designer is a specialist in the design of an interface, a UX designer, on the other hand, has a much broader remit. They care about copy and the site's performance and the supporting email marketing, the pay-per-click campaigns and the SEO and every other aspect that form the overall user experience. Unfortunately, we talk about UX designers, and it's that word designers that causes the problem. Many people associate the word design solely with visual design, and that means things like copywriting, marketing, psychology, research, business, and the numerous other areas that a UX designer has to be experienced in is not seen as design related. And that's why I actually call myself a UX consultant. This limited vision of what design is why UX design has become seen simply as a more advanced or better version of UI design. And that is, quite frankly, really insulting to UI designers. Perhaps you recognize these two images. One image shows a path that has been walked in a park that users have just walked and they've ignored the proper official path. And then the other image, well, that includes two ketchup bottles. One of the squeezy ones that you keep turned upside down and the traditional glass ones. And both of these are regularly used to kind of explain the difference between UI and UX, but both are really inaccurate. I hate these images with a passion because they're bollocks. These images imply that UX design is simply better UI design, and that's not true. UX design is a completely different thing. Think about the implication of these images, right? According to these images, a UI design is bad design. It's the person that designs a path that's in the wrong place, or designs a ketchup bottle where you can't get the ketchup out the bottom. By contrast, UX design is good design. And that's not true. A UI designer will consider user behavior to ensure that the path is in the right place in a park. And a UI designer will think about the user's pain points when they're designing a ketchup bottle. In fact, you could well argue that a UI designer will put more thought into these kinds of things than a UX designer because that's their specialty. Their specialty is in the interface. As a UX designer, I can't hope to match the breadth and depth of the depth of their knowledge. Yes, I have a much broader set of experience, but I haven't got that specialty of a UI designer. The result of all these myths around the role of UX design is utter chaos. Designers feel like they have to become a UX designer in order to be seen as an expert and progress their career. Job descriptions are impossible to live up to because they require you to do both roles. And many call themselves UX designers when really they're not, and probably wouldn't want to be anyway because their passion is in visual interface design. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm a UX designer or consultant or whatever you want to call me, and I love it. It's amazingly rewarding and I would never go back. But it's not for everybody. And actually, a UI designer is of equal value to UX designer. It's just a different role. However, if it is something you'd be interested in transitioning to, if you'd like to move across into UX design, then do let me know. And I will put that workshop together, which I will then show you what UX design really is and how I went about making the transition from being a UI designer to a UX designer.